Good morning, a good evening, and good afternoon. This is Nathaniel Kempson Productions here today, and welcome back to Railworks Terrain Simulator 2000 and Classic. Wait. So, jokes for the new name for Railworks aside, this is where we left off last time. I do apologise for the amount of time between this video and the previous one. Things happened. And now we're back at it. That's all we need to know. So, this is where we left off yesterday. Last time? Man, I'm tired. And this episode, we are going to be continuing. So, I think I mentioned previously we're going to be doing some very basic signalling. So, we need to get on with that. You need to go over to your object tools and the signal icon for track infrastructure. And then we're going to find some signals. Now, I don't remember if I set these up. Oh, I did. So for signalling, I'm going to use these ones from the Exeter Kingswear pack. These are the lower quadrant ones. So I'm going to choose LQ2A, which means I think 2 aspect, 4-foot arm. This one here. Place it like that. And then the little line arrow thing, I'm going to put after this point lever thing somewhere there. So you can see now that this signal will interact with trains at that point there. And I can move this any which way I want to, but I'm going to keep it past that point. So in the event that we have, for example, a light engine movement or a short goods train in this track here, it will still interact with the same signal telling trains in the platform road that the line ahead is blocked. Because if I were to put the little gizmo thing up here, the trains on the other track wouldn't be able to interact with it properly. So I drag it all the way down to there so that all trains can interact with it. So that's one signal. So now, as I say, I don't really fully understand signalling air quotes properly. I just kind of do it the way that I think it makes sense. So I'm going to sink this point lever into the ground. So this will now be controlled. This point will be controlled by this signal box, which we'll place in a moment. So now I need a ground signal. So takes a while to scroll through. If I just press S, it'll probably be here somewhere. Oh no, actually, I think it comes up as one of the... Yes, there it is. Shunt signal exit. So it doesn't really matter which side of the track you put this on, but I'm going to put it this side just for the sake of I want it there. And then we have one Dobby thing here and the second Dobby thing in the loop line. So what that means is this signal here will tell us whether the route between this Dobby bit and that Dobby bit is set or not. Which basically says, yes, you can move into the loop to run round, essentially. So we need to do the same thing up here. And I'm also going to make this sink down. There we go. So now I need another exit one. I don't necessarily know the difference between exit mainline, exit preparer, and all that nonsense. I just kind of do it in a way that looks right to my eye. It might not be totally prototypical to the real world, but it works in my head and it looks fine in the game. So this time we are going to go from here to the platform road there, and in the same way this signal will now tell trains or tell engines, loco crew, whether or not the point is set to get into the platform road or not. So that is basically all the signalling we need for up this end. Potentially I might put a ground signal on this point as well. Yes, I think I will. So I'm going to shrink that lever down as well. And then I'm also going to get another shunt signal and spin it round there. One dobby bit there and one there, and now this signal will tell loco crews whether or not they can access the yard or not. And then all of the remaining points, which in this case is just 2, can remain with a little ground lever next to it. They don't need to be controlled by the signal box. So, I guess now we need to find a place to put the signal box. Now, I think it would be fun to have the signal box here, in this in this open bit here between the 2 tracks. It's got good visibility, so I think it makes sense. So now we just need to find which one we want. So we can have a look at the ones in the AP Stations pack. There are many to choose from here, if I can find them. There we go. So we've got a couple of choices. We've got this small one here, which looks like that. And then we have an even smaller one here. So I don't know whether I want to use those. Let me press S and see if there's any decent ones in the Sutton Carlisle pack. Signal box Armathwaite. So we've got this yellow one there, which looks very gaudy. One for Bleemore, which actually says Bleemore, so we can't have that. Whoops. One that for Settle. It does actually say Settle, so we can't have that one. This is for... does that say Colgate? So we could have that one. Doesn't have any writing on it. Garsdale, which is a bit bigger. You can see that's a much bigger box. I do quite like the style, though. Kirby Stephen, that's a bit too modern, and then that seems to be it. So I think I quite like this one here. So have a quick look around it. Make sure there's no obvious Settle and Carlisle specific labels on it, which there are not. So have it in the middle, or... no, I think I'm going to have it over here, actually. A little bit closer to the main lines, maybe. Position in the signal box doesn't really matter that much. No, I think I'll have it over here, so the signalman... oh, pardon me. So the signal person has access direct from the platform, which makes a bit more sense in my tiny brain. Pardon me. So let's get that nice and straight. Put it somewhere there. I can add some ground textures and stuff to it there. So that's some very basic signalling. You could, if you wanted to, do point rodding and stuff as well, which we might do at a later date. But for now, I'm going to do some very basic groundwork over here. So you want to go to your paintbrush tool, and then the paintbrush on a piece of paper tool. That's your terrain paint. And then you can kind of just choose whatever you want. In this instance, I think I'm looking for the one that says coal. There we go. I'm going to change my paintbrush size to... we'll try 20. So this is kind of my go-to generic dirty ground texture, essentially, for a yard or a depot area. So just squidge it down there. Now this will have the added benefit of getting rid of the floating grass particles that were interfering, if you recall from the last episode, with the inspection pit here. So we'll put the splodge down there. It doesn't look spectacular, I will admit, but once you get extra details and stuff on it, it does start to look a lot better. So I'll just make it go round the turntable here, being careful not to get it too much on the running lines there. And then I'll also do a splodge underneath the shed area, like that. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's just an indication of slightly dirty ground. Might see if I can do a small paintbrush and add a little bit of separation back with some green grass. Just in this area here. Cut it a bit close to the shed. There we go, that's better. Because of course the filth will be contained inside the shed, so that's not too much of an issue. So I'll very carefully see if I can put some back, but not too much. Yep, that's too much. So this could be a slight issue. This is something that Railworks seriously needs to change. There we go. Or needs an update on, is how the paintbrush tool functions. It doesn't function properly at all, really. So I think I'm happy with that. There we go. So we've got some very basic ground textures going on there. That's looking good, but everything's kind of flat. So I think it's time we decide on some terrain features. So we're going to put this in a very shallow, flat-bottomed, glacial-cut valley. So you want to hover over this one here, top left, one that says level, and then we can choose a height. So I'm going to choose a height of 300 meters above, and then the paintbrush size of 500. Now these numbers are big and scary, and for good reason. So let's start this side first, somewhere, say here. Boom. Now we have Table Mountain. Now that does look a little bit too tall, but it could be because it's so close to the track. So I'll put it here. I'll just go along like that for the minute and then come down. You see, now to me that looks quite a lot better. So get up high where things are weird because the game doesn't render things properly. And we're only going to do a little bit of terrain just where our little station area is for the moment. So that side like that. And then over here. Somewhere here. Trying to be careful to take into consideration where the track actually is down here. And now we'll go on to the smooth button. Still with the paintbrush size of 500. And just kind of squidge it all round, really. That just takes the edge off of the vertical blob of ground we just did. So if I just get down back to track height, you can see that's what it looked like. And now it looks a bit better like that. It looks a bit weird because we haven't really done it properly. But we can keep going and keep squidging things around and poking it about until we get something that we are happy with. And remember, you can always change the paintbrush size. If it's doing too much, change it to a paintbrush size of 300. And that just makes it a little bit more gentle on the terrain. Just helps smooth it out a little bit more. And whether you can see or not, also adds some very interesting lumps and bumps into the ground itself without really any effort at all. So we get down nice and low, and you can see there, looks pretty good. There's a little bit of a crater over this side, so we need to fix that. Bit of a lumpy bit there, and then all of this up here is a bit of a mess, but we'll be continuing the valley on this way anyway, so that's okay. So now we can do the exact same thing on this side. It is difficult to see. I don't know whether there's a way of changing why the game looks like this. I suppose you could tweak your graphic settings so the blue haze goes away whilst you're doing this and then set it back, but that's a hassle. And also, I can't be bothered. So, there. So let's check how that looks. Yeah, not bad actually. Looks a bit funky with this bit over here. So what I am going to do is I will continue the valley this way a tiny bit more. Just kind of round the corner. Which one was it? That one. Oh no, that... Sorry. That's the height. I'm getting mixed up with paintbrush size. There we go. So we don't have the track yet, but it's going to continue in a kind of this way direction. So we'll continue the valley kind of around here. Bit of a steep curve, but that's fine. And then we'll also do it on this side as well. Round like so, making it a bit wider, and then smooth the whole thing out. Now, I've elected to put this railway, that's my phone, I've elected to put this railway route in a valley just because it is the easiest way of building a route. As this is a tutorial series, I wanted to keep it relatively simple so you can follow along at home at your own pace. In another tutorial, I might do a kind of series on how to create a route on a heathland area, a little bit like Sunbury Dales, my current route that I'm working on. So let's fly back down somewhere there. You can already see that looks miles better. Still need to do some smoothing out, so why don't I put that in a time lapse and we'll get started. Alright, so I think that'll do for the moment. We have some decent looking valley sides coming on here, looking very nice. Bit of a flat spot up here that I've just noticed, so I will very quickly fix that. It's looking a bit better. Bit of a funky shape up here as well. It's probably where, yeah, probably where the terrain kind of joins. Most of this can be fixed. There we go, very easily. Ignore this lump for the moment. And this lump here and the weird shape over here. We can fix that once we've decided what this railway is going to be, essentially. So whether, for example, we want to continue the valley on up into the distance, or whether we want to curve the valley off round a corner to block off the fact that there's no world behind it, basically. So this is what we've got so far. I think it's starting to look kind of interesting, but you can see the terrain around the railway is very flat and well, it's kind of boring. So number of ways we can do this. Click the noise button, and if I go over here, simply just click and it will make a big mound. Basically the same sort of thing as the level button which we use to create these hills, but it's much more gentle, and you've got all of these controls here which you can change: paintbrush size, the height tool, the frequency, and all that good stuff. Personally, I kind of just keep it as it is, and then essentially with the mouse I just kind of go like that around everywhere. Doesn't matter if you cover up the track too much. Just go roundy, 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 roundy like so. I might even change the paintbrush size to be 100 as well. There we go. To add some slightly sharper, lumpy, bumpy bits as well. Basically, you just keep on going like this. Kind of everywhere. And then when you're done, it's going to look quite strange, and also we've buried our entire station in a massive avalanche. So now we can go with the smooth option like we did before and smooth all of these lumps and bumps out and make it much more natural looking and a lot less like it was attacked by giant moles. You don't need to think too much about this kind of thing. essentially, the thing that you need to have in mind is that nature, in this case geology, is very rarely actually flat, especially in the UK, where we are basing our little route on, our little railway here. So these slight undulations and lumpy bumpy bits, as I've been calling them affectionately, just help add a little bit of variation in the terrain and the way things look. Adds a little bit of texture as well for basically no effort at all. I mean, you've been watching this entire process here and how quickly it has evolved. So now our railway is entirely buried, so we need to do the snap tool, and we're going to select everything apart from roads, because we don't have any roads. So now there are a few options with this, but I'll show you what it does first. Just click, and anywhere there's track, it will automatically create a cutting. There you go. So the station building has been buried. So what we can do, and I'll have to remind myself, base width I think is the one we need. So I'm going to change that to a 20, and then there you go. You can see that it's actually created a slightly wider cutting in comparison to what was there before, and you can see it's knocked that back quite a bit. But because we built this at sea level, essentially, you can see in the bottom middle of the screen down here, terrain height 0. So what we can do, using our old friend the level tool, set this to 0, and then a sensible paintbrush size of, say, 100. And then anywhere we click will will automatically snap to that terrain height, the same way we did the mountains and the hills earlier on. So there we go. So now it's looking a lot flatter. And then we can come back with our smooth tool, which I'm going to shrink down to a paintbrush size of 50. To get rid of this very obvious cliff edge here. And then just smooth it all around, just like this. Nice and smooth. Doesn't have to be precise. Because if we're thinking about terms of the real world, this probably would have been dug out by hand, or potentially blasted out using dynamite. So you can see there, it's looking quite cozy down here. And before we end this episode, the last thing rather I want to do is decide on where this railway is going to head. In this direction, we're going to be operating it in a this way direction, which I believe is north from the station. Yep, so the south of the railway, as this is a heritage line, will not exist. So I don't know. Ah, yes, see, I've made a mistake there. I've forgotten that I had sunk the terrain round the turntable. There we go. So I'll just quick fix that. There we go. That confused me for a second there, because of course the asset block, which should be down here, although interestingly I can't see it. That's very curious. So I will probably, because I did snap to terrain, which may have messed it up a bit. Yes, there you go. You can see it's come back now. So that is something to be careful of, wary of. The snap to track option can kind of make things go a bit wonky. The easy route will be to bury this in a tunnel. But what I'm interested to see first is what it would look like with a cutting, because of course we can undo everything. So I'm just going to the track around there like that. And then with the same settings, cutting, oops, 100 size paintbrush. Now, follow along wherever the track went. So the track went there. Does that look silly? Arguably, it kinda does. Interesting. So, why don't we try an old railway tunnel? We'll see what that looks like. So, over to your objects, and we'll just click T for tunnel. Tunnel portal A. Single track. There we go. This is just a generic kind of default tunnel mouth, essentially, to see what it would look like. You know what? That doesn't actually look that stupid. I think that looks pretty good. So we'll set the tunnel mouth to where the track is there. So that's where we know the track used to be. Then, simply, using the what I call manual terrain editing tools. Actually, I will leave that piece of track there for the minute. I'm just going to bring the terrain up with a sensible paintbrush size. There we go. Now this is tricky. This isn't easy, this method, I will admit. Right now, it's not much fun. So I'm just going to bring the terrain up around the tunnel portal in a somewhat realistic way. Remember, we can smooth any of these weird lumps out in a second. And then with some very careful light clicks and long, fast mouse strokes or swipes, whatever you want to call it. Like that. Looks reasonable. So now we need to have a very, very small paintbrush size. We'll do 10, see what that does. And I'm also going to put this back to 10 as well. Okay, there we go. So now I can delete that piece of track there, and we're left with a tunnel mouth. And then our old friend, AP Stations, I think. So perhaps we will give this a try. I'm pretty sure this is the same kind of asset I used on another route. I am going to try and resize it a little bit. There we go. With our old friend, the resize tool. And then sink it in. So you can see it's trying to make a... So I spin it round. Ah, there we go. Okay. So, sorry, I completely forgotten how I tell you how I did that. Down here, it says Legacy Gizmo, which just means it's the old style gizmo thing, essentially. Rather than having to select everything separately down here, it's just a little bit easier. You can toggle it, whoops, on and off as well. So there we go. So that's a nice bricked up tunnel mouth. There we go. Could do with smoothing off a little bit more. So I will just... Why is that not working? Paintbrush size is probably too small. Try 20. That's better. How's that looking? Yeah, it's looking alright. So I think I'm going to increase the paintbrush size to 50 and just bring up a few lumps behind the tunnel itself, or the tunnel mouth, so that once it's smoothed, it should blend somewhat seamlessly back into the existing terrain. Being very careful not to smooth it out too much. There we go. That's looking quite a lot better. See, I never said this was going to be easy. So we could change this tunnel portal for another one. There are plenty of tunnels to choose from. So that's what we've got. Portal A. Actually, that one might be slightly better, but I think this might be one of the ones that's a little bit tricky to deal with. So we'll have to try and get it in place, like kind of like that, really. There we go. That was actually easier than I thought. I think that looks a bit neater. Don't necessarily know if that's the right height, but you can see it won't let me select the tunnel again. So if I just do back until it disappears and then forward again, it's still highlighted. So now I can manipulate it, and yes, it had sunk into the ground a little too far. Somewhere there, and then we'll just raise that up till it sticks out the top, and then with the make bigger gizmo, like so. A little something. Oops. Wrong button. Till that disappears behind there. Like that. That'll do. Slightly darker, brickwork at the top of the tunnel mouth here, but hopefully from a distance that'll just look like extra shadows. So now we know that our railway used to continue through this tunnel and off into the distance. So our railway now has some kind of basis in the real world, essentially. Except for this bit, which we will be working on next time. So, there we have it. The fruits of today's labours. Let's get a decent shot where the terrain doesn't look too stupid. Somewhere there, I would think. Let's go into play mode. There we go. Look at that. Isn't it lovely? Doing one of them. And I will say thank you very much for watching. And goodbye.